Hey Creepypasta fans, it's Kira with the Dark Cosmos. Enjoy tonight's sci-fi horror story, and remember, stay cosmic. It was a calm Friday evening. The school bell echoed into the air as students trooped out of various classes, going about their business. Jack! Susan's voice sounded from the far end of the alley. Jack knew that voice anywhere.
Hey babe,
He replied calmly.
are you still up for our date?
Susan walked up towards him and embraced him, calmly, as Jack stole a quick kiss. Sure, I wouldn't miss it for anything.
How about your dad? He's not gonna let you run off into the woods for a few days.
Jack said. He's going on a business trip with my mum. Jack was already grinning.
We have the entire weekend to ourselves then.
He said as he strolled towards his car.
Come on, let's stop at my house before you go home.
Jack added. It was spring. Susan stared out the car window as Jack sped away from the school premises. She loved spring, the sweet scent of blossoming flowers, the calm and cool evening breeze, and the beautiful nostalgia that came with it. This was their final year, and she pondered on what adventure awaited her after high school. She shifted her gaze to the canopy of trees that stood high in the distance. The Firefly Woods, as the kids called it. The woods were always lit by a beautiful display of fireflies at night, swarming throughout the entire forest and illuminating the night. A beautiful sight to behold. She had picked the spot for her date with Jack the next day. They wanted to spend a night away from the noisy town, and the Firefly Woods were just perfect. Her gaze was drawn back to the road as the loud screeching of tires erupted beside them, and Jack cursed at the top of his voice.
Son of a bitch!
He had almost collided with an oncoming driver. The driver was probably drunk. Susan shook her head in confusion.
You okay, babe?
Jack asked as he sped towards his street. She gave him a calm nod and shifted her gaze back outside of the window. Her father would be going on a trip in the morning, and she couldn't wait. Jack soon arrived in front of his home, snuck Susan into his bedroom, and shut the door. They exchanged glances. Jack stared at Susan lustfully as she grinned wide. He strolled towards her, searching her lips, and began to kiss her passionately. He locked her towards the wall, and they both wandered into a distant fantasy. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on his door. Jack? Is that you? I need your help with something. Jack groaned. He had already begun to climb several mountains and valleys with Susan in this beautiful fantasy world, and the last thing he wanted at the moment was his mother's pestering. He ignored her. Jack? Susan pulled away. Come on, you need to answer her.
I'm coming!
He let out grudgingly. Susan chuckled, hitting him on his chest and pointing towards the door. I think I'll be going too. My dad wouldn't be happy if I get home late, Susan said.
Alright, I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget to bring some backup.
Jack joked and winked as he strolled out of the room. The morning came with a new freshness as Susan waved her parents goodbye. She had packed her things and had been waiting for her parents to leave before giving Jack a call. She watched closely as they drove out of the yard and into the highway, slowly disappearing into the distance. She danced around, smiling. She picked up her phone and placed a call through to Jack. My parents are gone. We can go now, she said with increasing glee.
Alright, babe. I'll pick you up in 5.
Susan rushed into her room to gather her things. She was set for their camping date in the woods. Little did she know what adventures the day had in store for them both. Jack soon arrived, and she jumped into the front seat. They were going to have a fun night together in the woods. Firefly Woods is a popular camping site in town and has been declared safe for recreational activities. It was a natural wonderland, blessed with a beautiful canopy of trees, birds, a waterfall, and of course, the delightful display of the forest illuminated by fireflies at night. It was the perfect spot to cuddle under Jack's arms as they stare into the skies, watching the stars boast of their beautiful light in the dark space above. A wonderful wonder. They soon arrived in the woods, and Jack snaked his way around the trees as they searched for a perfect spot. After a while, they found a spot. They set up camp and unpacked the food.
So, what you want us to do first, huh?
Jack winked while munching on some chips. Susan smiled sheepishly. She knew what he meant. Jack licked his lips. This made Susan twitch in suspicion. Movies? She chuckled, ignoring his gesture. They had set up their tent, and the evening sun was already going to rest. A few of the fireflies had already begun to fly around as they both watched in awe. Susan was staring at the laptop screen when she felt warm hands down her skirt. She knew it was Jack, and she remained quiet. Their lips soon locked together once again, and the intensity began to grow. Suddenly, a strange bang erupted in the distance. They were both too occupied to notice the first time. It returned, but this time, sending vibrations throughout the area. Ouch! Susan let out.
What the hell was that?
Jack exclaimed, rushing out of the tent. You bit my tongue, Jack! Susan let out angrily. Another bang erupted again, from right in front of them, before Jack could respond. Susan shifted her gaze towards the direction of the incoming tremor. I think it's coming from over there, she let out, strolling calmly towards the direction. Jack held her back.
Babe, what are you doing?
Checking it out.
What? Come on, we need to get the hell out of here.
Jack yelled. A roar echoed behind them as their feet sprung into motion. They didn't know where they were running to. They wanted to get as far away from the strange noise as possible. Jack, I'm scared, Susan let out as they ran further into the woods.
Oh shit, where the fuck did I park my car?
Jack mumbled angrily. This was meant to be a perfect night. Was someone playing a prank on them? He thought. They told no one about their date. They stopped short when they got to a sinister-looking structure.
Is that a cave?
Jack stammered. Two strange noises in one night. What the hell was going on? Something moved in the bush behind them, and they both turned in shock, breathing heavily as they took slow steps backward. Click. Susan stepped on something just right in front of the cave. They exchanged glances before shifting their gaze towards the floor. There was a strange carving on the floor. They both swallowed hard. The first bang they had earlier heard returned. It seemed as though they were standing on the belly of the beast. The entire ground shivered under the force of the tremor. It seemed to be coming from right below them.
What the?
Jack exclaimed. The ancient carving gave way as a bright light engulfed the night. Jack and Susan's screams echoed into the night as they descended into a large pit. The pit seemed endless and dark. They held themselves close as they descended further.
Susan! Susan! Babe! Susan!
Her eyes popped open, and she immediately gave a loud gasp. It was Jack. She wanted to speak when Jack covered her mouth, motioning to her to remain quiet.
Something is out there,
Jack whispered.
It's still dark outside. Let's wait till morning.
Where are we? What happened? Susan asked, cautiously.
We're in a cave, babe. I'm not sure, but we're going to find out in the morning.
Jack replied. My head hurts. Susan knew that something was different about the place. But just as Jack had said, they had to wait until morning. Morning soon arrived, but the duo could hardly tell the difference. The sky was covered in a dark hue as they stepped out of the cave. They scanned their surroundings as they snaked their way around on the road, which was covered in old, rusted cars, crashed and scattered all over the road. The debris of strange objects lay on the ground, and it seemed as though some sort of war had happened a long time ago.
What happened here?
Jack mused. On a high-rise building in the distance, Nicolas was crouched with binoculars in his hand. It seems we have some visitors. He was amazed at how they walked carelessly on the road, and their clothes seemed different. He knew what had happened, and he had been waiting for them. He had been waiting for the time loop for over a decade. They needed them alive to correct the future. His mistake. But he knew that the aliens would soon get to them. Nicolas knew that they would need to act fast if they wanted to get them alive. Jack, Susan whispered. Look, she said, pointing towards a billboard. It read 2046.
Oh my god. I think whatever we fell into took us into the future. Susan, watch out!
Jack's screams echoed into the air. He shoved Susan to the ground as several shots were fired towards them. They did not sound like guns. Jack managed to take a glance at what was shooting at them, and he could not believe his eyes. A group of people suddenly sprung out from nowhere, shooting at the aliens, bringing them to the ground. "Get up, quick, let's go. More will be coming, I'll explain later." A husky voice sounded behind them. A few men grabbed both of them as they sprinted away from the open. Jack and Susan stared in confusion at the recent turn of events. They were too shocked to protest. The men have returned to the shadows in seconds. They fought very quickly and coordinated. It was nothing compared to anything Jack had ever seen before. The men had taken them to an underground chamber. They remained quiet throughout. They were taken to a heavily bearded man who sat calmly in front of a round table. He seemed like their leader. "I have waited so long for you." Jack and Susan exchanged surprised glances, but remained quiet. "There's not much time left. The next time loop will be 15 years from now. We need to get it right this time."
Get what right? What happened here?
Jack asked, confused and desperate. Nicolas sighed. "Relax. We're not here to hurt you. In fact, you are here to help us. 25 years ago, my father unleashed chaos upon the Earth. He found a portal and opened it, granting these creatures a gateway into our Earth. We have tried for years to send signals into our past on a day before my father ever finds the portal, and we have finally been successful. We will help you to get back to our past and your present, but you must promise us that you'll destroy the portal gate before my father gets his hands on it, to prevent this future from ever happening." "How do we get back?" Susan asked. Nicolas shifted his gaze away from them. He knew that it was not going to be an easy task. "Jack, I don't understand what's going on. What was that man talking about? How can we be in the future? That's not even possible." Susan began to plague Jack with several questions, but he also had no answer. Everything seemed real, but they couldn't still wrap their minds around it. A few moments ago, they were in the heart of the Firefly Woods. But now, they were in a post-apocalyptic world, destroyed by the terrifying creatures they had encountered earlier. They didn't have a choice. They had to follow Nicholas's instructions if they wanted to remain alive. Jack and Susan strolled through the underground chambers, and their hearts sank as they saw the pitiable condition of the people. Food and water supply were limited. They were barely surviving. They both exchanged glances. At that moment, they knew they would have to do everything they could do to make sure this future never happened. The duo were taken above the chamber to take a look at what had become of Earth. It was dreadful. Everything as far as the light touched looked dead, and all the people now had was the distant memory of all that had been. How long has it been this way?" Susan stammered in shock.
"The war between man and these things has gone on for over 2 decades. Many tried to send them back to whatever hole they crept out of, but they all failed. They always seemed to be one step ahead of us each time, like they were somehow watching our every move. That is why we have to be careful. I may be wrong, but we might just be the last resistance left on the planet, and it would be impossible to defeat them with such small numbers."
A small cough interrupted his speech.
"You guys are the only shot we have at survival," he continued. "To prevent the entire human race from extinction, you are our last hope. I'm not sure we can last much longer like this. I see the Grim Reaper in my dreams every night. He gets closer each time. I fear it might be an omen of what's coming."
Susan swallowed hard. She could feel her heart pound from the weight of the responsibility they had been given. She shifted her gaze to Jack, who seemed lost in thought.
But how do we get back to our timeline and correct all this chaos?
Jack finally spoke up.
"You guys need rest. I'll brief you guys on what you'll need to do before we set out tomorrow morning.
Jack nodded in understanding.
We have prepared a bed, some food, and a bath for you guys. I know it may not be what
We understand. We'll be fine.
Jack said, taking Susan by the hand and strolling towards the path which Nicholas had pointed to. Do you think we'll make it back, Jack? Susan asked.
I have faith. I know we will.
Nicholas was right. The only thing they could manage was the bed. The food and the bath were terrible. I'm scared, Susan said calmly. Jack heaved a heavy sigh before turning to her on the bed.
Hey, I'm here, babe,
he said while stroking her hair. Susan pursed her lips. The stress of the day and the uncertainty of the next brought a mix of emotions. She stared sheepishly at Jack. He was staring back. Her heart skipped a beat.
I'll always be here.
Jack assured her as he pulled her closer and locked his lips into hers. The sound of crickets lingered. Darkness had swept across the sky, but there always seemed to be a strange suspense present in the atmosphere. They were awoken by a loud bang on the door. The sun had not yet shown its face.
Come on, it's time. We have to go now.
A grumpy voice sounded behind the metal door. They could both hear gunshots in the distance. What's going on? Susan let out. Jack swallowed hard. He could hear loud cries of men in the distance, the last they would probably make. He jumped into his clothes and strolled towards a small window in the room. His jaw dropped in shock. The entire camp was swarming with aliens. Another loud bang erupted behind the door. It was Nicholas.
Jack, Susan, we need to go now. They've broken in.
He sounded desperate. Jack and Susan exchanged glances. His words were enough warning. Jack rushed towards the door and pulled it open. Nicholas was breathing heavily.
Take this.
He forced a gun into Jack's arms.
Pull, aim, shoot,
he said, staring straight into his eyes.
No matter what happens, make sure you both get the hell out of here alive.
There was no time for Jack to ask unnecessary questions, and he knew this. He nodded in understanding.
Follow me,
Nicholas said, before speeding into a narrow path in front of him, as the duo trailed closely behind. They emerged in an open field. Everyone in the underground chamber had left their haven, and were scattered all over the field, running towards a canopy of trees that stood in the distance. Several men stood their ground, attempting to hold back the creatures from gaining ground on the fleeing crowd, but they could only do as much. The otherworldly creatures were persistent, tearing down everything along their path.
How do we get back to the present?
Jack asked as he ran.
The same way you came in,
Nicholas replied. What? Susan was well aware that this was definitely not their town. He could not be talking about Firefly Woods, she thought. Nicholas noticed her confusion. He stopped short.
I don't mean the exact place you guys came from,
he started, panting as he spoke. The duo had stopped to listen.
My father was a researcher. His work was always centered around discovering some sort of ancient time portal. I often thought he was crazy, to be sincere. Mother left us because he was obsessed with his work. He felt like it was his purpose. Everything changed when he began to discover some ancient ruins scattered in different locations in the world. He traced them and later discovered that they were portals.
There were a few carvings very close to the cave in the Firefly Woods, Susan added.
Yes, that should be one of the portals,
Nicholas replied.
So, if there were carvings in the past, then they should still be here in the future.
Jack added.
They were, Nicholas said.
Wait, what?
Jack looked perplexed.
Aliens destroyed them.
All of them? Susan asked.
There is just one portal left. It's not far from here. We moved to the underground chambers to secretly guard the last portal. If they destroy this one, everything is lost. They are aware of your presence, and they know that you would be trying to right our wrongs of the past. That's why they're coming at us with everything they've got now. The omens were clear, but my father never listened. He linked all the portals together and unleashed chaos upon our Earth. No one has ever seen them since.
So all we have to do is make it to the portal?
Jack was still speaking when one of the creatures suddenly descended in front of them. It had advanced weapons embedded in its arms. It was built up of metallic appendages, and it was terrifying. Its entire body pulsated in synchrony with some strange energy from within its body. They had never seen anything like it. Jack pulled the trigger on instinct, and Nicolas soon joined him. A few of the resistance fighters sprung out from amongst the crowd, throwing heavy fire at the aliens, and they soon brought down the alien. They fought with a strange dexterity. 2 decades was a long time, Jack thought. Besides, they knew their importance, and all hope was lost without them.
Next time, shoot here.
Nicolas pointed towards a portion of the alien which seemed like its lower abdomen. Loud snarls from the creatures emanated from the distance, masked under the sound of heavy gunfire and the screams of dying men. This was the last stand.
We need to go.
Nicolas pulled them all back from their trance, and they immediately joined him, racing towards the forest. The sun was now high up in the sky as they made their way towards the portal.
We're almost there, Nicolas declared.
Nicolas, look! Nicolas's gaze was drawn towards the supposed site of the portal. Scores of alien creatures raced towards it.
No, they took a shorter route.
Nicolas didn't have much time to think about his next action, so he acted based on his instinct. He rushed towards the alien, screaming atop his voice and throwing at them everything he could. His men joined him along with everyone else that had fled from the underground chamber. Most of them didn't have weapons, but they joined in the rally anyway. Nicolas stopped and turned briefly.
We'll distract them. Make sure you make it back,
he said. What about you? Susan asked.
Don't worry about us. Correct the past and this reality would never be born, but both of you will remember that there are many things dwelling beyond the stars, and most of them are better left undiscovered. When you meet my father, tell him that the stars have hidden their faces. He will know that I sent you from the future.
How will he...
Nicolas was gone, lost amongst the crowd. Jack still didn't understand a few things, but time was running out. Jack and Susan raced towards the portal. They heard familiar sounds. It was the same sound they heard the night just before they fell into the sinkhole. It could only mean one thing. The portal was still open. But Nicolas had said that only they could pass through the portal to the past and their present. Suddenly, Susan tripped on a branch and fell to the ground, injuring her knee. Ah! She groaned in pain. Jack stopped and crouched beside her, ripped out a piece of his shirt, and wrapped it around her wound to stop the bleeding. One of the creatures meandered its way through the resistance fighters and approached them. Jack instantly steadied his gun towards the alien, but he was too slow, as the creature dislodged the gun from his hands and threw him towards a distance. Susan sat on the floor, unarmed and terrified as the alien approached her slowly. It should have been faster. Jack appeared out of nowhere with a knife in his hand and punctured the creature several times in the region where Nicolas had earlier shown them, bringing the alien to the ground, but he didn't stop until he was certain the creature was dead. He turned to Susan and stretched out his hand, breathing heavily. She was shocked at the recent turn of events, but she was proud of Jack. She took his hand as they both continued towards the portal. They took a quick glance at the chaos behind them, just before leaping into the portal. Jack and Susan were glad to be back, but they knew they had work to do. They needed to find Robert, Nicolas's father. They had arrived in a strange lake in Hong Kong, and thanks to the internet and wireless banking, they were able to discover the location of Robert and fly to meet him. They had met him at the nick of time as he was already set to launch the last portal. They had to stop him at all costs.
The stars have hidden their faces,
Jack declared. Time was not a luxury they had. Robert gasped in shock before laughing hysterically.
Oh, so Nico finally succeeded. He sent you.
Jack and Susan exchanged surprised glances. They were confused. Robert wasn't even meant to be aware of the future of events. What were they missing? He knew about this all along? Susan let out in disbelief.
Why?
Jack was already bathed in his sweat. He was tired and angry. All he wanted to do was put an end to all the madness. Robert ignored them and continued towards the portal.
Robert?
Jack let out.
Robert!
He exclaimed.
If you start the portal, you'll bring doom into Earth. Your son sent us from the future to stop you.
Robert remained silent and continued to stroll towards the ancient carvings. Jack had seen enough. Jack, no! Susan cried out, but Jack had already pulled the trigger. He missed anyway, but something else emerged. Out of nowhere, A sinister-looking creature crept out of the darkness and rushed towards Jack. They would have been surprised if they had not journeyed to the future, but they would recognize this creature anywhere. Of course, it had been sent to the past to prevent anyone who would try to stop their emergence until the last portal is destroyed in the future. He wasn't crazy or paranoid. He was being controlled and manipulated, Susan whispered. Susan shifted her gaze towards Jack. She had never seen that look in his eyes. He was strangely calm. He looked like he had a plan down his sleeve. Jack brought out a strange weapon from his pocket.
Stay behind me, babe,
he said calmly, before charging towards the alien. The alien charged towards them, but Jack remained unfazed. He cracked a shot towards the alien, killing it instantly. Susan gasped in shock. She had expected more of a fight. Robert fell to the ground in the distance too, trembling in pain.
A parting gift from Nicolas,
Jack said, as he stared at the weapon. They had completed one task, but they knew they had to destroy all the portals on the Earth to prevent such a thing from reoccurring. It had been a tiring day, and they both needed some rest. They found comfort in each other's arms.